So you want to learn Japanese, huh? You want to be that Nihongo Jozu boy or girl so you can brag to your other anime and game and weeb friends that I can speak the Nihongos. But at the same time, you want to do it in a fun way. So what do? You're going to go to the closest entertainment factor about the Japanese language. And for most people, that would be anime and manga. I can have fun and also learn the language at the same time. Two birds, one stone. But if you've known me for a while, I've said many times that that is but a dream for a lot of people. Because out of the hundreds and thousands of times that I've gotten tweets and emails and messages about how do you get Nihongo Jozu? How do you become fluent in Japanese like you, Joey? I've always mentioned to them, just get textbooks, attend classes, grab a Japanese friend who is fluent in the language that you can speak to and communicate to and practice with. Basically, every other method that doesn't involve anime and manga. Because to be straight up honest with you guys, using anime and manga as a method to learning Japanese is not exactly a method that I would recommend. And contrary to all of the videos on YouTube out there of people saying you can learn Japanese using anime and manga, I learned how to be conversationally Japanese just by reading volumes of Naruto and watching every episode of Demon Slayer. It is a pretty difficult path to go through if you want to be conversationally Japanese and speak Japanese in a way that a native speaker, for example, will be able to be like, oh, okay, this guy has gone through and actually studied the language properly, and I can actually understand everything about what he is saying. That is, of course, if you don't use this one trick. I'm just gonna drop the bombshell right now. It is possible to learn Japanese just from reading manga and just from watching anime. Unfortunately, a lot of people just do it in the wrong way. Because truth be told, when I was a kid, I also learned a lot of Japanese through reading manga, watching anime. And if I were to sum up the one trick or the one method that I used when learning Japanese through manga and anime, that term would be age appropriate. Understanding and utilizing age-appropriate media when learning a certain language and the culture revolved around that language is going to be the biggest difference. It's going to mark the biggest difference between just knowing a bunch of words and what they mean and actually being able to utilize those languages and terms into a proper flow of conversation that sounds natural to that native speaker. And just to make things simple in this video, I'm just going to be using the example of learning Japanese through manga and anime, because that's the title that you clicked on. I think what a lot of people forget about manga and anime especially, and more specifically manga, is that there are different types of manga for different demographics. There are manga that is specifically targeted towards little kids, as well as there is manga specifically targeted towards high schoolers, specifically targeted towards young adults, specifically targeted towards full-grown adults. And what you need to do is, especially if you are starting from zero, as in the only Japanese words you know, the couple of terms you heard in Tokyo Drift, is you have to start right from the beginning. You have to pretend and live out the life of a Japanese person from scratch. In the sense that the first manga series that you should be reading is not Naruto, is not One Piece, it's not Attack on Titan or any of those popular shows that have become massive and well talked about internationally through the success of their manga and anime series. No, the first manga series you should be reading is the shit that is intended for like the 5-year-olds. And one piece of information that you'll want to really have in the back of your mind when trying to pick age-appropriate manga for studying purposes is the existence of manga magazine serializations. You guys have all heard about Shonen Jump, right? That's probably one of the most famous manga magazines out there. Contrary to the international understanding of Shonen Jump fan bases, the Shonen Jump magazine and the contents inside of it is not so much dedicated to young kids between the ages of, let's say, 9 and 14. The theming, the vocabulary, and the use of words and phrases and sentences in a lot of Shonen Jump magazine's works is intended for young kids, specifically high schoolers. Of course, young adults and even full-grown adults also enjoy Shonen Jump, but you'll very rarely find an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old picking up a Shonen Jump magazine, just because in terms of the level of words and vocabulary and sentencing and storytelling, it's actually quite difficult for a lot of 8 and 9-year-olds to fully read and fully understand what is being written in a lot of Shonen Jump stories. Which you might think is interesting, right? Because you think of, say, like, the common Naruto fan, or the common Demon Slayer fan, or the common Jujutsu Kaisen fan today, and you'd think a lot of them are like, you know, between the ages of, let's say, 8 and 15. But you can ask any 8-year-old about, say, the subtleties and the subtle details of, say, like, a lot of very adult themes and topics that are occasionally presented in a lot of Shonen Jump manga and anime, and they'll probably have no freaking idea. Like, the main reason why 11 and 12-year-olds enjoy Attack on Titan is because of the action and not because of the political thriller storyline behind it. So in terms of reading manga, especially as an educational method to learn Japanese, picking works that are age appropriate to, in the case with foreigners learning Japanese, the level of your Japanese vocabulary and understanding is going to be super important to actually fully utilizing manga as a learning method. So for example, you are at level 0, right? What I would recommend you to read is not Shonen Jump. I would recommend is another magazine intended for much younger audiences, more specifically, Korokoro Komiku. This is a monthly magazine that comes out in Japan, and this is the magazine that I first started to use and read when I first got into manga at the age of like 4 or 5 years old. Basically, the moment I fully started to understand all of hiragana, katakana, and some of the most rudimentary kanji that you learn from in, like, you know, the second or third lesson of Japanese that you might take in a classroom, then you can basically start reading most, if not all, of the works in Korokoro Komiku, because the main demographic for the Korokoro Komiku magazine is for young kids in Japan. Yes, if you are, say, in your, you know, mid to early 20s, and you might go back and read these, like, kiddie manga that have very kiddie themes in it, you might kind of think, oh, well, I'm kind of above that now. You know, this is not really the type of works that I would read if I were to, say, read it in English. But it is the best start if you want to use manga as, again, an educational tool to not only learn how to read functionally, but also learn vocabulary and understand them in the context of the sentences. It's also just a great way to understand the culture behind how the Japanese language is structured, because I've always said learning a language isn't just about learning the words, learning the sentence structure, learning how everything flows into a sentence, but it's also about how the words are used, why certain words are used, and why and how certain words are used in different contexts. It's the equivalent of trying to explain to a Japanese speaker who's trying to learn English what the term "it's lit fam" is. Yeah, sure, as just a bunch of words on screen, it's easier to read, and you could probably break down what each of the words mean, but in terms of the actual context of the sentence, if you don't understand the culture surrounding internet memes in English, then you probably won't understand what the fuck this means. And it's exactly the same in Japanese. Of course, I'm not just talking about like internet meme culture in Japanese, because that's just on a completely different level. But different sentence structures and the alphabet that is used in the writing and reading of Japanese is not just the biggest difference between English and Japanese. There are a lot of Japanese words that exist that don't exist in English, and vice versa, whether that be because of the actual word that exists in the vocabulary or just the way that a particular word is used in a particular sentence. So once you've gone through a couple of years of starting off with the kiddie shit, right? Starting off with the stuff that kids in Japan growing up in elementary school will start to read through manga form. Then, once you've become qualified, or rather confident in reading through that stuff, and not just being able to read it perfectly, but also being able to understand the words and the context and everything like that, then you can move on to things like Shonen Jump magazine, Shukan Shonen magazine, Shukan Shonen Champion, Shukan Shonen Sunday. Stuff that is more dedicated for, again, teenagers and young adolescents in Japan. And trust me, the jump between Korokoro Komiku and all of these like high school, middle school oriented manga is pretty freaking massive. Even for someone like me who went from Korokoro Komiku to Shukan Shonen Jump, it was a big stretch. Like, I immediately saw that, oh, this one is way more difficult and has a lot more difficult words and phrases and just context that you don't even see any of in anything that is in Korokoro Komiku. And you know, as like a 10, 11-year-old kid starting to read things like One Piece, Naruto, and Bleach, and Dragon Ball, it is actually quite difficult to fully understand. Like, sure, you can just look at the pictures and enjoy that, but if you want to understand the context of the story and what characters are saying, which is, you know, you'd hope is the main reason why you would go through a manga story to begin with, then you really have to like sit down and use it to study. Like, at least in my context, I would have Shonen Jump magazine that my grandma would buy from Japan, and next to it I would have a dictionary open. It's like English speakers trying to learn Shakespeare. And going back to the beginning of it all, this isn't really just a trick that is used in Japanese when it comes to anime and manga, right? Like, even in English, right, you can use, say for example, movies, right, like to learn English. For example, you can start off with simple stuff like Sesame Street, for example, and then once you've understood the words and the context in, say, Sesame Street in English, then you can move on to things like Pixar movies, Disney movies. And then once you've gone through the Pixar and Disney movies, then you can go on to just regular Hollywood films that use full-on contextualized English. This is a trick that can be used to learn any language through using entertainment medium, and I feel is one trick that a lot of people don't cover when talking about using entertainment mediums as a form of study material to learn a language, especially when it comes to learning Japanese through things like manga and anime. And of course, this isn't a video of me backpedaling on my opinion of you can't use manga and anime to learn Japanese, because in my opinion, you can use manga and anime to learn Japanese, but it is going to be a very limited pool of knowledge that you're going to gain. In my opinion, still the best way, the most efficient, correct, and in my opinion, the most fun way of learning Japanese is making a Japanese friend to speak Japanese with, coming to Japan to perhaps study here for a while, you know, like even living in Japan for a little bit and being surrounded by the language and culture will get so much Japanese into your head that you won't even realize it. But of course, not everybody has those luxuries or those connections. So in the meantime, if you only have entertainment mediums like manga and anime at your disposal, then yeah, that is the one trick that I would recommend. And when I say using manga and anime as a study method, right? Sure, using it as a study method might actually take away from the enjoyment of reading manga or watching anime, so I would recommend doing it with manga and anime that you have perhaps already experienced. Like, don't pick up a manga that you've never read before and use that as study material, because it's most likely going to ruin the experience of reading that story for you. And remember that with a lot of manga stories, they also make up a lot of words. Okay, like you're not going to be going around Japan using the word Hokage in your day-to-day conversation. So it's also good to, you know, understand what is a manga and anime only word and what is an actual word that is used in day-to-day Japanese life. One, I guess, final thing that I tell every person who is trying to learn Japanese, regardless of if they're using the anime or manga method or they're using the traditional method, is don't rush that shit. Language is an art. And if you rush art, you're gonna be so sloppy that no one will be able to take you seriously. Really nail the fundamentals and really try to understand it from its core. And if you're able to do that, then the rest will be smooth sailing. But don't expect to be a native level speaker like myself in a year, or even 5 years, or for some people, in 10 years. I got to a level of native speaking Japanese that I was comfortable enough to say that I am native level and 100% fluent in, probably when I turned 23 or 24 years old. So suffice it to say, it's gonna take you at least 20 years, I think, for you to be like properly fluent in Japanese. Hell, for some people it might take longer, for some people it might just be like second nature to them. Of course, everybody's different. What I'm trying to say is that you're not gonna get fluent in the next year or so. That's just physically impossible for any genius. Take it slow, but also take it fun, because there are fun ways to do it. And of course it's not easy. That's why someone who knows more than one language is so highly looked upon, because it's not easy. I may make it look easy, but it's really not. I studied probably a lot more than a lot of people think I studied. That whole ideology of, oh, you have a Japanese parent, so it's unfair, is the most bullshit excuse that I will ever hear in my life, because no, just because one of your parents fully speaks a different language to the one you grew up with, that does not make you in the advantage. I know plenty of friends who have Japanese mothers and fathers who don't know a single word of Japanese or is nowhere near the level I got to because they didn't study it like I did, because they didn't put the time and effort to actually understand the culture and the language surrounding that culture at the core. I'm not trying to put myself up on a pedestal when I say this, by the way. I'm just telling you that's how I did it, and that's how I came to be at the Japanese level that I was. Honestly, anybody is able to get to the level that I am. You just need to be pushed in the right direction, and I hope this video did it for at least some of you. But yeah, that's about it. Let me know your opinions down in the comments below, and if there are any like other Japanese questions, tips, and tricks that you might want to pull out from your boy, then I guess you can leave it down in the comments and I may make a video about it. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to smack my face right now. Let's keep making big channel number go bigger. Over here next to my head is a couple more videos you can check out as well if you enjoyed this one, and hit your boy up on social media. Links down in the description below as always. But thanks for watching, guys. Hope to see you in the next one. Peace.